Good evening, citizens, guests, council, and staff. It is February 21st. City Clerk, could you call the roll?
Mayor Cernanik?
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Beckman?
Here.
Councilmember Brinkman?
Here.
Councilmember Cole?
Here.
Councilmember Stallman?
Here.
Councilmember Stein?
Here.
Councilmember Valdez?
Present. Would you please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. It's a nice scarf. I like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, do we have any changes to consider with regard to the agenda for this evening? And for those in the audience and watching, you may see some slight changes in how we've handled the agenda in the past. I will try to point these out as we move through the evening, so pay attention. Okay. Any substantive comments or corrections with regard to the minutes of the regular session on January 7th? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. We now come to citizens' appearances. We have no guest citizens, nor do we have any scheduled public presentations, but we do move to unscheduled public appearances. Unscheduled appearances are an opportunity for any citizen to express opinions or ask questions regarding city services, council policies, or other matters of community concern that are not part of the scheduled agenda. Generally, an immediate response should not be expected. Typically, issues are referred to city staff for follow-up information or research, or are researched and reported back to council and the individual that initiated the comment or inquiry. We do want to remind folks that if you are making a public appearance, that you do fill out the green card so we know how to get back in contact with you. Are there any public comments regarding items not otherwise under public hearings? Yes, Jeannie?
Hi.
Can I have your green card, please?
Green card. I didn't get a green card. Are they up there?
Yes. If you just fill one out afterwards and give it to me, that would be great.
Sure will. Good evening, City Council members. Jeannie Erickson, 5567 South King Street, Littleton. 2 weeks ago, on January 7th, 2014, I addressed the council with some questions regarding why the Charter Review Committee meetings were not being recorded. I suggested that the 14 committee members be asked if they would mind if the remainder of the meetings be recorded so citizens can view them online. I know the city council members want our government to be accountable and transparent, and by recording these meetings that actually go on at 3 o'clock in the afternoons when most of us are at work, we the people can have the opportunity to see what is going on with the process and what changes are being suggested. I was wondering if anyone had an answer for me.
Is that the extent of your comments?
For right now.
Okay, for right now. Jeannie, the council did take up the issue, and we actually had a motion, and it was decided not to. Any reconsideration would need to come from a minority on that decision or being brought up by another member of council. Thank you very much.
Okay, I did have one more comment. When it was brought up and it was voted on about a month ago, at that time, a council member had said that the meetings were about to wrap up, and I have a feeling that may be why some of the members may have voted the way they did. Unfortunately, that was not a true statement. They were only about halfway complete at that time. So I thought that maybe the reason why council members voted the way they did was because they misunderstood. And I would like to know if it could be reconsidered. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else coming up for comments? Yes, Carol.
Thank you.
Good job with the green card.
I didn't know I needed a green card. I'm Carol Breezak, and I live in the 4th District. Tonight on your consent agenda are some items that I would like to comment on. And it goes back to your study session last week. In your protocol document, I was surprised that in this day and age you did not address technology. With the use of emails and text messaging, certainly some protocols are needed. How long are you required to retain an email? If you delete an email, does it have to be considered for inclusion in an open records request? If you send email to each other during a council meeting, should it become part of the public record? If staff emails council members during a public meeting, should it become part of the public record? How long should your text messages be retained? I think council should determine just how you want to deal with all electronic communications among yourselves and among staff and council, and include it in the document. Another discussion topic was under the unscheduled citizen appearance. Citizens are told that, and I took from the agenda, typically issues are referred to city staff for follow-up and reported back to council and the individual. As someone who's come to this chamber a number of times with a question, I really can't remember when I've ever had a question answered by staff after the fact. Bruce Beckman wanted a procedure established so that he would know that his citizen's concern had been responded to. Thank you, Bruce. That led to another discussion. Should staff actually have to respond to each citizen? Should the council tell staff which concerns should be responded to and which to ignore? It was suggested that during council reports, if a council member wanted a citizen concern responded to, then they could alert the staff during the council report. If that is the way you're going to handle this situation, I would suggest that the council reports come after the citizens' appearance portion of the agenda. Then the citizens and staff know what to expect in the way of a response, or if there's going to be a response. You swore an oath to uphold the city charter, but did not make a statement in your protocols regarding the oath. It was talked about briefly last week. I don't think it's inappropriate to include a statement in your protocols that you will uphold the charter, even if it's just a reminder that it is a document that you need to consult often. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Anyone else? Frank?
Good evening, Council. My name is Frank Atwood. I'm at 7094 South Castilla Street, and I'm here to remind voters and citizens of Littleton and Arapahoe County that there's upcoming vacancies and that the deadline for City Council vacancies is the 31st of the month. The deadline, there's also vacancies on the Arapahoe County Liquor Board, and there's also vacancies on the Victims Assistance Compensation Board. And if individuals are wanting to stay current with City Council and with these vacancies and find details, I suggest that they write Paul Bingham and get Paul Bingham's email that will keep you informed. So Paul Bingham's email is pbingham@ecentral.com. Let me check with Paul if I spelled it correct this time. Thank you, Paul. This time it is correct. I'd now like to once again remind citizens I'd now like to remind citizens that we'll be doing a discussion on usefulness of eminent domain. It's going to be part of the fourth Tuesday, January 28th, 10 a.m. at Bemis Library. And this is an opportunity to, although eminent domain I don't think was used by Riverfront Authority, threats of it was used by the Riverfront Authority, as some of the indigenous businesses and trailer park individuals were aware of. So our speaker, I'm very pleased, is going to be former member Jim Woods, former city council, city manager Jim Woods, and I look forward to subsequent speakers, Tom Christopite, who that will be discussing successful public-private partnerships, and city manager Michael Penny that will be discussing business incentives. Thank you very much, City Council, and Happy New Year, a little belated.
Thank you, Frank. Would anyone else like to address a council? Okay. Seeing none, we move on to the consent
Bill.
agenda.
I've got one more.
Oh, Pam?
Frank is tall. My name is Pam Chadbourne. I live at Crestline in Nevada in downtown Littleton. I apologize. I missed what Jeannie Erickson had to say, and I'm kind of curious how you responded to her, so if you'd let me know. Or did you respond to her?
In part.
Okay. Is there a brief summary that you don't mind repeating, or?
Not at this time.
Okay.
It's your comments. Doug, thank you.
And so if this is repetitious, then tell me. I wanted to make some requests tonight related to the Charter Review Committee, and they're based on the value of transparency of city government and on the responsibility to provide citizens information and input into the process. So I want to ask that the Charter Review Committee be treated like other city representative meetings. Specifically, I'd like them to be video recorded and that the recordings be posted on the website. I'd also like to request that draft minutes be posted on the city's website before the next meeting occurs, along with the materials provided to the committee for that meeting. I'd like to understand how citizens can influence the discussions other than speaking in person at the meetings. And I'd also like to ask that when a citizen requests a response from council in public at a public session of council, that council respond in public for the information of the public. So is there already a response to any of those, or?
We'll respond in time.
Oh, okay. So at the last council meeting, Jeannie expressed concern that the Charter Review Committees meetings are not recorded. She asked that they be recorded for the public record. She noted that they're held in the mid-afternoon during the workday, so most people cannot easily attend. She noted that the committee members had not given consent prior to being recorded prior to serving on the committee, which was the reason given for why the meetings weren't being recorded. And she requested that members be asked if they would consent to be recorded. That's a reasonable request, and I echo her request. And I want to say that the charter is more than any other city document the people's. It's not council's, it is not staff's, it is ours. So, and I realize that you are people and citizens, but the community must be informed of what the committee's discussions include. So, and citizens should be provided with a way to address the committee members, perhaps by email, and that should be on the website, some way to tell us how we can write to them or something like that. I believe that city staff should not attend charter review other than for recording purposes except by invitation. The committee should set their agenda, and then they should invite members, staff to talk to them, and then staff can leave, and the committee can consider what has been said. So transparency and openness in the charter review process should not be a conflict for any of you. I believe your goals include public communication and engagement. So I think you want to do it. I don't think this is something you don't want to do. And just to mention perhaps why, ballot measure 301 to restrict executive sessions passed by 74% in the last election. The rezoning measure passed by 59%. This is a big message to council that people want to see what's going on and want to have input. So please consider that. Let Charter Review Committee be recorded. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments, Pam. Anyone else? Thank you. We now move on to consent agenda items. Consent agenda items can be adopted by a simple motion. All ordinances must be read by title prior to a vote on the motion. Any consent agenda item may be removed at the request of a council member. All of these items had been distributed to council last Thursday. They've had an opportunity to communicate questions as well. Item 6A is a motion to adopt the 2014-2015 City Council Protocols and Standards of Conduct.
I'd like to pull that.
Item 6B is a motion to amend the City Council legislative rules. Item 6C is a motion to adopt the 2014-2015 City Council goals and objectives. Item 6D are resolutions applying, 1, to an intergovernmental agreement between School District Number 6, Arapahoe County, Colorado, doing business as Littleton Public Schools, and the City of Littleton. And number 2 is a grant agreement with the State Board of Great Outdoors Colorado Trust Fund regarding playground improvement at Euclid Middle School. Item 6E is an ordinance on first reading repealing and replacing Chapter 10 of Title 6 of the City Code pertaining to Colorado Clean Indoor Air Act. Item 6F is a resolution urging Congress to support the Blue Water Navy Agent Orange of 2014 and restore the presumption of service connection for Agent Orange exposure for United States Vietnam veterans. And item 6G is an ordinance on first reading conveying by quitclaim deed the city's interest in storm sewer easements to the private property owner. Like a motion?
Move to approve consent agenda items B, C, D, E, F, G.
Second. Thank you. Council, are you ready to vote?
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
Thank you, Council. Returning to item 6A, Councilmember Cole.
Yes, I thought Ms. Brezak raised an interesting issue that we've not talked about before, and that is why, given all the things we have in the protocols and standards, we don't have something to the effect of upholding the city charter and ordinances and the laws of the and Constitution of the state and of the country. And maybe we have a little discussion, but I'm inclined to make a motion to add something to that effect.
Other comments at this point? Seeing none, I would like to. The oath of office is stipulated within the charter, and so I think to put it within our particular protocols actually is redundant in that regard because it's specified at what I might refer to as a higher level as far as what I'm concerned.
Well, I've commented, I think, twice when we've discussed this item in the past year or two, that I think that the oath that we take covers everything that's in this. I mean, in that integrity piece. And so it's more calling out of it, just as what we have here calls it out. But at least I'm just trying to articulate that position, so.
Councilmember Beckman?
Just a comment that perhaps a more inclusive way of addressing this issue might be under purpose and intent to just reference the charter, because the charter is not referenced in here as a base document for protocols and standards of conduct. Perhaps that would be helpful to have it as a reference document. And then, of course, the oath is just part of the charter and would be included in that reference.
I'd support that. Do you have a way you'd like to put that in?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that the protocols and standards of conduct that are finalized this evening would include a sentence in one purpose and intent that, and I'd leave it to staff to find the proper place to put it, but that the Charter of the City of Littleton provides the founding document for all issues concerning protocols and standards of conduct and is a primary reference.
I'd second that.
I have a motion and second. Any comments? Council, are you ready to vote?
The vote is 4 in favor with Councilmember Stallman, Councilmember Brinkman, and Councilmember Stein voting no. The motion carries 4-3.
Look for a motion on the protocols.
I move to adopt the City Council protocols and standards of conduct for 2014-2015 as amended.
Second.
Okay. Council, any discussion? Ready to vote?
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries. I'm sorry, who seconded that? Thank you.
Thank you. Proceeding to second and final reading on ordinances and public hearings. Note that a public hearing may come with an item that may not be at second reading, just to explain that on the front end. So folks hopefully will understand that. Item 7A is an ordinance on second reading approving a master services agreement and First Amendment with Comcast Cable Communications Management, LLC, for telecommunications connectivity services. Staff going to make a presentation or questions?
We can if there are questions. We have not received any questions.
Council, any questions? Okay. At this point in time, we will open the public hearing. Do we have any sign up? Okay. On this, we have one individual, David Borcherding. Okay, thank you. So we have no one signed up. Would anyone like to come forward and make a comment? Seeing none at this point in time, we'll close the public hearing. Looking for a motion.
I move that the ordinance approving a master services agreement and First Amendment with Comcast Cable Communication Management, LLC, for telecommunications connectivity services be approved on second reading.
Second.
Thank you. Councilmember Cole. Council ready to vote?
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
Okay. Item 7B is a resolution approving the citywide plan as an amendment to the comprehensive plan.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll just make a few brief comments about the process we went through and kind of what
And you're
we're
going
doing
to introduce
here tonight.
yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. Glenn Van Imwagen, Community Development Director. It's
Thank
good to
you.
be here tonight on this momentous occasion.
Planner humor, I love it.
Number one, I did want to make clear just what we're doing tonight. The citywide plan just replaces these sections of the current comprehensive plan. All the existing, more detailed neighborhood plans, corridor plans that have been duly adopted by the City Council still remain in effect, and we're not touching those with this process for you tonight. There's one exhibit that's in the comprehensive plan I just wanted to speak to a little bit, and that's how we use the comprehensive plan. The center circle is the comprehensive plan, and again, it reiterates the fact that it's not just the citywide goals that we're asking you to adopt tonight, but it's also the neighborhood plans, corridor plans, and hopefully future activity areas. That's something the Planning Board wanted to look at in the future. And this is the document we use in making quasi-judicial land use decisions. So anything that has to do with approving a subdivision, zoning, conditional use permits, putting plan development overlays in place. The comprehensive plan is that document that we have to be consistent with in making those decisions. But then you can also use the comprehensive plan in conjunction with other documents the council's adopted, your goals, the economic development plan. Another example is the bike pedestrian plan. And in concert with the two, you use those documents in giving you direction as far as adopting the budget, capital facilities plans, zoning code amendments. So kind of those non-quasi-judicial decisions, we also would use the comprehensive plan. So just to give you a little bit of history of where we've been with the plan on the tour, we went to all the council outreach meetings a year ago, summer. So in Trailmark, Powell Middle School, Euclid Middle School, and Goddard Middle School. And then right after those meetings, we had scintillating discussions with folks that would show up to our Inspire Littleton meetings, where we would, at each meeting, talk about specific issues of the comprehensive plan. And at the very beginning, we didn't have much turnout. At Trailmark, I think we had 2 folks, and then, let me just see. Then we went up to a dozen at Powell Middle School. We were up to 20 at Euclid. 25 to 30 at Goddard Middle School, and then we had about 60 folks here in the Littleton council chambers to kind of wrap it all up and explain what we heard and get a kind of a final test of other issues from residents.
Could I ask a question just on that?
Yes, ma'am.
Were those unique individuals? Because I know some people attended all of those.
I think you're right. I think we did have some folks that went to each meeting, and they weren't meant to be the same meeting. We talked about different issues. So
Yeah, no, but I mean, those were head count numbers, not discrete
right.
individuals, right?
Yes, that's an estimate from my memory
Okay.
of how many heads were there. We also went to a couple of community events. The Western Welcome Week Parade, we set up a booth and we asked people what they love about Littleton. We also went to the Main Street event. I can't remember what we called it in 2012, but also had a booth and met a lot of folks, not only from Littleton, but people outside of Littleton, and they gave us their input as well. We didn't necessarily attend every concert at, in fact, I don't know that we attended any in official capacity at Hudson Gardens, but we did have a presence, and we had these beach balls that were being bantered about, and on those beach balls was emblazoned the logo for Inspire Littleton, which was our online town hall. So folks that didn't want to come to a meeting, we still got a lot of good information, and we gave you some statistics here. When we went to the meetings at the events, we kept it kind of simple. What do you love about Littleton? And people would write things on sticky notes, and that's an example of what one of those boards looked like. We had 638 participants in the Mind Mixer Inspire Littleton website. We got 557 ideas, 857 comments on those 557 ideas. We had online visitors of about 7,000 and online page views of 51,000 something. But this wasn't just information that went out there and went away. We actually took stats and wrote down every comment we heard, put them in categories, and provided that to the planning board. It was kind of about a 1-inch thick document. So we learned a great deal from that. It wasn't just an exercise in reaching out. We did get a lot of information, and those comments have been put into the comprehensive plan that's before you tonight. And then finally last night, or last year, we had about 13, planning board held about 13 meetings. 2 of them was a joint meeting with the City Council on February 26th and May 6th to kind of check in as far as progress on the plan. On November 25th, let's see, the Planning Board actually had public hearings on, I think it was the 14th, the 28th, and the 25th, just to get more comments, and we did at each one of those meetings. And then on November 25th, the Planning Board recommended by a vote of 6-0 that the City Council adopt the citywide plan. And then here we are tonight, hopefully for your adoption. So with that, staff is recommending you adopt the citywide plan, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions from council?
So one question. Mr. Taylor, former council member Taylor, pointed this out. There is a section in here that actually relates and specifies downtown, and I'm wondering why that is in here.
I think it, because these are really goals for the whole community, it was hard to ignore the downtown as being kind of a special place, and you're
but
right.
they're in the downtown plan.
You're right.
So why would we have it both places?
I think the board and staff felt that, I mean, to reiterate the fact that downtown's a special part of the community, rather than just ignore it at this level, I think that was the feeling. Now, I will say, I do know Jim Taylor's concern about subparagraph C in relation to height. I think what we did is boil down in a lot less detail what's in the neighborhood plan. So in this case, where we talk about the downtown, I think is very high level and appropriate for this document. And there is much more detail as far as height and appropriate development in the downtown neighborhood plan.
Other questions from council? Yes.
Yeah, cool.
Councilmember Valdez?
I'm glad to see it finally get here. Great, good job.
Yes,
Hey,
thank
one thing,
you.
on the, what is this, on the figures, if you would, I'm thinking just as a format process, if you could put the figure at the top and what it is at the top, a couple different places that's at the bottom after you read the graphs, and that's just, I meant to email you on that, but I never got around to it. You follow with what I just said? Even on Exhibit E, where it has a nice map, but then has the neighborhood corridors, and it tells you what it is. That was just me. Maybe nobody else cares about it, but that was just.
Oh, sometimes they're at the top of the map and sometimes they're at the bottom.
Yeah, it just, yeah. But I do have a couple questions, though. When I get to, I guess it's page or introduction 6, it starts with updating is on the top left, and you get down to related plans.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Just above that last bullet there, the last sentence there is, as plans are updated, neighborhood boundaries may be revised to better represent the current and anticipated conditions. Give me an example of what that might be about.
Point to me where you're looking at again. On the second column, or you're in the second column?
On the left. On the left.
On the left, okay.
And you get, okay, you see where the last bullet starts out with corridors general?
Yes.
The sentence just above that, where it says, as the last sentence of that paragraph, it says, as plans are updated. The last sentence, it's the last sentence of that
Of that bullet that starts with corridors.
Oh, it's a sentence.
Just above that, just above that.
The paragraph above.
Okay, as plans are updated.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Read that sentence out loud so
Okay.
everybody hears.
As plans are updated, neighborhood boundaries may be revised to better represent the current and anticipated conditions. One of the things that this plan talks about is annexation, so that might be an area where you might change a neighborhood boundary. That would be one example I could think of. We do have them set in the current plan, but there's potential that some folks think, well, maybe I'm not in Stern Park, maybe I'm in this adjoining neighborhood. So I think as we go forward, maybe those lines would flex. I think we just want to kind of keep that door open if that,
Okay,
if
yeah,
that occurs.
I think you answered my question. And then on that last bullet there on the left, where corridors generally, in the middle of that where it says the boundaries of neighborhood plans and corridor plans will not overlap to avoid conflicting objectives.
Right.
So, and I'm thinking of the Broadway corridor, where you have residential on the west side.
Mm-hmm.
So do they fall into a neighborhood plan or a corridor plan?
Right. That's exactly what we don't want to occur. We don't want to have conflicting ideas of here's a corridor and have kind of rubber band lines that would go over into the neighborhood plan. So I'm not sure what the boundaries are exactly of the Broadway corridor plan, but the intent is that there isn't that overlap. So we'll make sure that it makes sense when we get to that point.
So then now in the right column, last sentence of the first bullet, get down to activity plans may be contained within a corridor plan. What about neighborhood plans?
It should be the same thing. The activity areas could overlap both.
Okay, but we say corridor plans, but not neighborhood plans?
We don't, and I'm not sure why we didn't mention neighborhood plans there.
Is that something that you will do, or?
If council feels we should make that change, we
It seems
certainly
to me
will.
that, it seems, I look at that, and it appears as though with neighborhood plans, there will not be an activity plan.
Right, and I think our graphic actually shows it overlapping both, so I think that was the intent.
And then when I get to instruction 7, where it's the chart, small area plans. Let's see, the column where it has updates or create.
Mm-hmm.
So does the update mean that that's when it was updated?
No, that means that there's one existing and it's going to be updated.
Needs to be updated.
Needs to be updated.
Or, okay, so that answers the rest of that.
And create, there isn't anything right now.
Let's see, then for the Progress Park neighborhood, I don't see any activity area for the northeast quadrant of that area as a need or as create, I guess it would be.
As an activity area?
It's just not addressed in here at all, as something that's going to need something with, you have Nordgrens over there that could change. We have a school over there now, and there's just other areas over there that seems that there's some changes happening in that area.
Right, but it will be updated with the other neighborhood plans.
Just
Is
as
that
a
what you're
whole,
saying?
as the Progress Park plan, is that what your intent is?
Yes.
Okay. And then, let's see, on the next page, introduction 8, at the bottom, where it tells you again what the figure is all about.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, I believe it is the end of that sentence. It says boundaries will be set for that area and that maps will be updated to reflect those and any other changes. Who's going to approve the changes?
Ultimately, that'd be city council, because as we amend neighborhood plans, this map could change, and that would ultimately end up at council.
Okay, so, and then when you look at the crosshatch on where it says Littleton Boulevard, South Broadway area,
Yes.
so should the crosshatch also include part of the residential area? That's a question, I don't really know.
Yeah, I think the intent of the crosshatching is to show those areas that need to be created because they're not any part of our comprehensive plan now. So it's hard to see the detail in this map, I think, but that was the intent, is that these were new areas. So I'm not sure whether that cross-hatching should come down as far as it should, but we will double check and make sure that's accurate.
Thank you.
Yes.
Councilmember Beckman?
Just to tag on to one of the questions that Councilmember Valdez asked, looking at introduction page 8, it indicates the Progress Park neighborhood is everything in that northeast neighborhood, north of Broadway, and then it has east and west boundaries, but it takes into account a larger area than just Progress Park. It takes into account almost the whole northeast area, and is that what it is supposed to do?
Well, this would be as they're drawn today. So
Okay.
I believe probably the comprehensive plan today includes this large of an area, but maybe it's not the subdivision we know as Progress Park. It might be much larger.
Okay. I think that's the fact. I think it's much larger in the plan, but not in our context of thinking the area.
Right.
And that may be one of those things that I think might need to be adjusted. Like Norgren is a great example of that. That's a place that is undergoing a lot of change. A couple other questions. On the introduction, page 7, which has the status of the small area plans, I have a question about one of them, and it's been a hanging issue for me for some period of time. The Broadway corridor study, does that exist today to be updated, or was it never formally adopted and we might be better off to start over again?
Right. That seems to be a point of much consternation. We looked at the minutes. In fact, I have them here. The actual plan doesn't say adopted by the council. I think it says approved. And when I've looked at the minutes, it kind of looked like the council wasn't ready to make it a part of the comprehensive plan at that point, but they still felt there was some valid information on it. And if you remember back when we've presented a couple of zoning cases that included the Broadway corridor plan, we kind of relate to it as, here's kind of what we learned from the study. But the comprehensive plan is silent, and we feel it meets all of these, blah, blah, blah. So I guess the short answer is, I don't feel that it's part of the comprehensive plan.
Yeah, so I would say that then, rather than update, it would be create.
That's probably more accurate.
It may be very adoptable, or it may not be, but it isn't like the others.
Mm-hmm.
One of these is not like the others.
Right.
Okay. And then I wanted to challenge the thought on the priority for update or creation, and back to the Progress Park neighborhood, just because of the issue that I talked about with the complexity of that, I would question why it would be medium and not high. And I know, some of these are subjective, but that to me is one that really does jump out, and that if you were to feel like you have to give and take, I would say that the Trailmark neighborhood is one which is fairly well established and certainly could go from medium to low to do that. And those are my two trade-offs to suggest on this because of what's going up in the northeast neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
So just a thought. I don't know if council's interested in changing that, but that northeast neighborhood probably needs to be a little higher, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So I don't know if that's a motion. I don't know if we're getting into.
Not yet.
Okay. And then the other, I had one other point. It's great that we put the map or the conceptual map drawing that we have up on the wall here, but it would be great to have maybe in the page across from it where we're going to have an introduction to this entire thing, a paragraph that explains how to read this, because there is a conceptual process in this that if one doesn't understand the difference between being in the center and being to the edges, they will not understand its intent.
That's a great point. And perhaps in the mayor's letter, they could explain kind of the concepts there, if that works. But you're right, there are much more deeper thoughts in that than would appear at first blush. So
They're actually on the city's website.
what was that? I'm sorry.
Commentaries on the city's website.
We added in.
Yeah. I mean, it exists.
We can copy that.
That completes my questions.
Any other questions from council? Councilmember Stallman?
Glenn, I guess I was wondering if you could maybe to tag on to council members Valdez and Beckman. All the neighborhoods, with the exception of the downtown neighborhood plan, which was recently modified, I get that that one would be a low priority for further activity. I think the Progress Park neighborhood, you can argue, is a higher priority, but I would agree that the activity areas or the corridor plans would be high priorities for us. What was your guys' thinking in sort of suggesting that things like Kettering and South and Southwest and Stern Park are medium priorities when there doesn't overtly seem to be a lot of changes that would go into a small area plan for those neighborhoods?
That's part of it. And I think we feel that a lot of the neighborhood plans are good as they are, and there probably wouldn't be a lot of change. Quite frankly, I think it's more of maybe a pragmatic reason why there's some that are high priorities, and part of that is due to the funding we're getting from DRCOG to look at the 2 light rail stations that we hope to extend into the Santa Fe corridor study and the Littleton Boulevard corridor study. So those have time limits on them, so that's kind of why they rose to a high priority, more than something went down to a medium priority.
No, I agree with that. I personally, that makes sense. I guess I was maybe going in the direction of, do the neighborhoods need to even be medium, or are they predominantly low priority when we get the rest of the corridor and activity area plans done?
Yeah. I don't think we wanted to say neighborhood plans were a low priority. I think that maybe that was part of the psychology of it as well. I really think, as far as working with the planning board from this point forward, we don't think that funding is going to be available till probably May. So I was hoping we could actually get through some of these neighborhood plans between now and then.
Okay.
The ones that don't have the major changes involved.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions from council?
So is this a time also for comments about things, or is this just questions?
Primarily questions.
Okay, some of these I think are questions. I mean, they're implied questions, so I won't go through all of them. I do have a question about one of the photos that's in here and the tag that's under it on introduction, page 3. So it says, one of the most common responses to the question, what would make Littleton an even better place to live, was, quote, a low-maintenance house with a yard in the same neighborhood. That picture of multifamily, high-density stuff doesn't relate to a house with a small yard.
I think actually, not to get too picky, but Littleton Station does have townhouses on the back that do have courtyards, probably not what you might consider a small yard. I think part of it was there was a real concerted effort to have pictures from Littleton, and I think the feeling was we didn't have something that directly maybe got to the core of what this question was, or what the desire was in the community.
Well, I mean, in that case, it seems to me you don't put a picture in, or maybe you put the picture of the back courtyard, but I still don't think that the building you're referring to really is what a house with a small yard is. In my head, a house is not a condo, it's not an apartment, it's a house.
It's detached.
Yeah.
You're thinking more detached.
Or at the biggest stretch, a duplex. But, and I'm not trying to be fussy there, but I think it's an important thing to capture that sense, because I've walked this city in 3 different elections, a hell of a lot of it, and people tell me, hey, as I get older, I would like a smaller house with whatever. And I think of quite a few of the houses that are between Prince and, as depending on where the cross street is, as far as Prescott and Crocker and so forth, even the other side of Windermere, they're small houses. My house is 1,000 and some square feet plus the garage. That's what I'm thinking of as a house, although my yard's bigger, than probably a lot of people want, but it's mainly xeriscape, so it's
Is there a
not-
question in this?
No, so I'm just trying to get the clarification with that. So, question, can we get a more appropriate picture, or maybe a couple of different pictures?
If council would like to make that change, we'll do our best to find something.
Okay. And then, so if something, I'm a little confused when I'm supposed to say when. So if I have a question about something that's said that doesn't seem to match an illustration, is this the time to ask about that?
If you want to change it, it would be later. If you just have a question.
Then I'll hold all the rest of them.
Thank you.
You talk about after public comment. Okay.
Other questions from council? Seeing none, we will open the public hearing. Thank you, Glenn. First up is Mr. Don Bruns. Did I get that right, Don? And he wishes to speak. State your name and address.
Mayor Sinanek and members of the council, my name is Don Bruns. I live at 7332 South Costilla Street in Littleton. At least some members of the planning board have recognized...
And Don, excuse me, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. Could you speak closer to the microphone?
Sure. Thank you. At least some members of the planning board have recognized that the citywide draft presently before the council for consideration is more a vision statement than an actual comprehensive plan component. But their attempt to change its title failed on a 3-4 vote. I would like to ask the council to take a second look. Before the planning board, even the city planner referred to the draft as our vision. It seems likely that when the city tackles neighborhood and corridor components of the comp plan to follow, this draft's broad visionary outlines will be found to allow pretty much of anything to occur. If so, that would hardly seem to qualify as a bona fide plan component, but that also raises the same question, and particularly so if, as some board members indicated, it is within these more detailed follow-on plan components where specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound or SMART objectives will be addressed. But still more importantly, the citywide draft's apparent accommodation of transformative growth and development seems out of place with much of Littleton's most distinctive community character, despite recent efforts to transform it, which remain still intact. Some believe these are merely visions of grandeur held by whomever, maybe our city manager, perhaps simply by corporate interests or whomever. But be that as it may, there's nothing particularly strategic or sustainable about transforming our community character to the point where we become just like the surrounding urban sameness. With a view to our shared future, I therefore last fall presented to the planning board copies of Community Character by Koenig and Keast. And also of Design for Ecological Democracy, which I shared with the council in an earlier meeting. For the past several months, it appears that the central point of controversy about the comp plan remains the degree to which it does not yet address some of the most basic elements of community character. That concept in reality is inextricably related to our quality of life and therefore seems to encompass much of what concerns many of our fellow citizens. This book is extremely provocative in that regard. And so some of the most imageable elements of community character are graphically represented in a presentation that Brett Keast gave 2 years ago at the American Planning Association conference on, quote unquote, the role of community character in place-based planning. The first graphic here shows 8 community character type profiles on a spectrum from rural to natural urban core. And I believe that all 8 types are still represented in our fair city. The second graphic shows the relative, depicts a relative proportion of green, gray, and brown space and can be used to classify not only what exists in any area of the community, but to help plan its desired future. In Keith's presentation and in the book, green is the volume of vegetation, gray is the impervious area consumed by roads and parking, and brown is the three-dimensional space consumed by buildings. So I hope that the Council will take the opportunity to review and consider these publications. The citywide draft presently being considered doesn't yet address these important components and instead appears to promise both respect for communities, for Littleton's small-town character and culture while it promotes the accommodation of transformative development. While some planning board members did indicate they believe that both can coexist, the citywide draft doesn't yet explain how that can happen. That seems like essential missing content for a sustainable future, socially, culturally, environmentally, and yes, even economically. So why is it important for the community for the city to complete this missing staff work? Because Littleton's most strategically important resource includes not only its natural and cultural heritage and the businesses that complement them, but also its culture, brand, and reputation. If we damage or erode our most distinctive community character, then we lose a significant part of both our quality of life niche and the economic engine it engenders. These are our competitive strengths. So I think that the Council will find this book marvelously provocative. I found it so, and I think it'll be especially so for you who are sworn to serve our community and its residents. I think this is fantastic content for looking to the future, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Don. Next up is Carol Brezak.
Carol Brezak, live in the 4th District. I want to show you Louisville's citywide comprehensive plan. Fine print, really not that many pictures. This is Golden's. Fine print, not so many pictures. Full of content. This is ours, if you remove the pictures and reduce the font. This document is sorely lacking in specifics. If you've not reviewed other citywide plans, you really should postpone any approval of this document. You will see that there are missing elements. Both Golden and Louisville had far more public input than our process. Louisville held 60 public meetings along with continuous online discussion, and then they held 4 all-day design workshops that were open to the public, where the public could come in and engage. They built the framework. When the 4 days were completed, there was a final workshop where they came back and they commented on what the staff had put together and did some more revising. I think it's time to take this document out to the community and let the community engage in a dialogue about what it actually means. 4 minutes in front of this body is hardly an opportunity to give you input. And we now have a document that's worth talking about. To be specific, citywide plan, your vision statement, I would suggest that you add the words, preserves the small town look, feel, and character. I know this is going to be hard, but 4 minutes doesn't allow for a very easy way to do this. Under your transformative perspectives, we need strategies so that we ensure the implementation and that we better understand as citizens what they mean. Under your policies, number 3, it implies that any retailer that only attracts non-residents is not welcome. Policy number 4, I would like for you to add the words with minimal impact on nearby residents. This is a lousy way to do this. On policy number 6, I would like for you to add the word without following trends. It's talking about housing development. and responding to market demands. Let's not follow a trend just because it's a trend. Number 7, I'd like to see what the strategies are. Is it eminent domain, urban renewal? Under 9A, you're talking about pedestrian active street in downtown Littleton. I would like for you to add the words without interrupting traffic flow. 9B, define density and how it is needed. 9C, you need to define mass and scale. We know since Broadstone fit into the definition of mass and scale for downtown Littleton, and it wasn't approved by you nor the citizens, that perhaps we need to talk about what mass and scale actually means. Under 9D, you talk about providing support services for the needs of downtown residents. What do support services mean? There's no definition. Goal number 2, under your policies, 1A, you talk about identifying natural areas and wildlife habitat. Why not inventory rather than identify? I'd like to see a new policy added under policy E that would develop visual, scenic inventory and protection measures. This all has to do with the outdoors for those people that don't see what we're talking about. Goal number 4 is distinctive Littleton, and you talk about maintaining and expanding. I would like for you to add the words while protecting our small town feel and character.
Carol, are you close?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Can we
Time's up.
continue this for another night? There needs to be a real forum so that the citizens can engage with you about what this document says. Don Bruns hit the nail on the head.
Thank you, Carol. Next up is Marsha Wilkinson, who does not wish to speak but is against the project. Next is Jocelyn Strait, who does not wish to speak and is against the project. Next is Jeannie Erickson, who is not in favor of the project and does not wish to speak. Next is Keith Wilkinson, who does not wish to speak and is against the project. After that is Stu Maher. Good evening, Stu.
Council, Stu Maher, 6696 South Crocker Way, City of Littleton. I never really know what I'm going to say when I get up here, but I want to do some reference a little bit ago to a marvelously provocative book. And community character as it's expressed in that marvelously provocative book. I'd like to reference another marvelously provocative book, namely the book we know as the Bible, and maybe reference some work by one of our renowned biblical scholars, Walter Brueggemann, who is well known as the author of a theology of the city titled The City, a Work in Progress. It's Brueggemann's theory that, and sense of his lifetime of reading the Bible, that God's will for creation is all wrapped up in, I'm paraphrasing, is all wrapped up in creating a viable Jerusalem that will become the earthly manifestation of the best of God's dreams. For Councilman Cole's purposes, Brueggemann reads the Bible historically, critically, and historically literally, not literally, period. I would suggest that this is a visionary plan, and we need to really fix on the vision and understand that the city is a work in progress. And that work goes on, not necessarily in this forum, but it's been going on for years. 2003 Littleton 2030 plan. It's been going on through all the numerous meetings and forums and planning commission meetings. We don't need any more forums. We need to get on with the business of making our city a work in progress and making it the best that it can be. These goals are granted, they're broad, but I think they are visionary. And I think that the plan that the City Council 2012-2013 came up with, our Littleton planning our future together, is really the challenge. Brueggemann, in his theology of the city, would talk about the challenge and the call, really, of all of us as members of a community, as citizens, to create community. We're called to a creative task. We're never really going to button it down with specifics. We need to engage the process and through that come up with the city that's never going to be fixed. It's never going to be what it was. It's always going to be something different. It's always going to be a work in progress. And I would encourage you to engage this plan and let us as a community get on with the business of becoming a work in progress.
Thank you, Stu. Next up, Pam Chadbourne.
Hello again, Council. My name is still Pam Chadbourne in Crestline, Nevada, and my request for you regarding this proposed citywide plan is the same as it was to the Planning Board. And as Don mentioned, there was a vote 3-4 to not call this a citywide plan. Call it a preamble, call it something else, but it recognized that it's not a plan and that there are visions that may be citywide, but it fails as to do what a plan must do. So please don't replace the existing sections, leave them there. Add this section following community-wide goals and policies and change the name, give it an overview of broad visions and policies, which is exactly what everybody has observed it is. And add a placeholder for the future citywide plan, and then improve the process. Include public education and dialogue sessions, as Carol suggested. Enlist a citizen advisory group to finish this citywide plan. Add essential sections to the plan and develop a management schedule, not a list, to complete the missing context and set up a work plan to do it. I'm sure some of you, most of you know real management, and this ain't here, so. The proposed plan does have a broad vision. It's got current demographics, which are patchy and incomplete, and it's a snapshot in time, and that's not what a plan is. A plan has to have, it must identify showstoppers and breakpoints. It's got to show what will stop us and what our challenges are. It can identify opportunities, but it also has to identify limitations and constraints. What do we have to do in the next 20, 30, 40 years? What do we have to pay for? How much money does that leave us to work with? And then an idea of what we can do with that. It's got to identify challenges, risks, and mitigations in the future. And the future has to be defined in the demographics of the future, not our current ones. For residential, retail, commercial, manufacturing components over time, it's got to include transportation and transit, regional projections. You don't just refer to someone else's document. We've got to show our assumptions and show our work in this one. It's got to show collaboration with our neighbors, and it's got to project energy cost and climate change impacts. And Littleton's like a 14-year-old. We have our first growth. We've got dreams and ideas. But you know what? When you're 14, you've got to start to focus and figure out what you're going to do specifically. You've got to talk about colleges, and you've got to pick colleges based on a whole bunch of reasons. You got to visit them and assess them and see whether they meet your goals. It's good to have goals, but you got to start to set up specifics about how you're going to get there. This plan is the same way, but it doesn't do that. Basically, it's trust me. these policies didn't come from the public. Absorbed and incorporated, get plus $4 gets me coffee. So you got to show your work. Where's the discussion of infill development? Infill is what we're going to have. That should be defined and described here. It's not. What are the criteria for blighted? Just a couple examples. So let me say, kind of like Carol and Don, do no harm. This can do harm if it's enacted as a citywide plan. A real citywide plan has to include many other things that are not in here. So please take my first suggestions and call this a preamble or broad visions or something like that. Set up a process that we, the citizens, can contribute as other cities have done in making the real plan. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you, Pam. Next, Linda Newfinke. Good evening, Linda.
Good evening. My name is Linda Knufinke. I live at 7089 South Clay Street in the 4th District. This draft comprehensive plan is a radical departure from the existing goals and policies of the comp plan. Because of this, the plan deserves far more discussion than what is scheduled tonight. So tonight I encourage you to debate the following items as a council. Are the four goals proposed by this plan adequate? Are the policies adequate for this plan? Remember, the Declaration of Public Policy for Rezoning requires any new development to meet the goals and policies of the comp plan and the general welfare of the community. So does this new plan allow for any and all new development without limits, effectively neutralizing the comp plan? And is housing sufficiently addressed? Is high density explicit or implied appropriate as a general value of the city as proposed in this plan? And since when is shopping a moral imperative as defined by this plan? And does the council want to promote public-private investment in Littleton? The city itself has made it into the history books on what not to do with public-private investment with the Riverfront Authority. And another thing is, if you don't believe in eminent domain, the draft plan should not include evaluate the redevelopment of potential blighted properties. If you do not believe in eminent domain, why does the economic development plan and the comp plan promote these concepts? And then assess what may be missing from the old comp plan, such as conservation measures, view preservation, variety of housing, and maintaining parks. And second, then address if it is appropriate to put a cartoon on page 2, and then address whether, do a better job defining the neighborhoods and the priorities of the plans. I think there needs to be discussion by the planning board on this issue. Is that list complete? Do you need to change it? Should the corridor studies be included as small area plans? Should the activity areas be included as small area plans? And then also, should you include the picture of Berkshire/Alta Aspen Grove, since the city has approved spending of $300,000 to screen this development from the park? Is that an actual example of the development, the kind of development the city wants? And then, as Peggy said, does a section on strengthening downtown belong in the plan, especially since there's no other area in the city that is called out? And then another, here's my pet peeve, source your graphs. And these are just some of my comments. I encourage you to debate and discuss this plan. It doesn't deserve a quick vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. That completes the list of those folks that registered. Would anyone else like to come up during public hearing? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Discussion among council. Councilmember Beckman.
Could I ask Glenn to come forward again? Glenn, can you clarify for me the issue of how this fits? And I alluded to it a little bit when I talked about the neighborhood plans. And my presumption would be that specifics about a neighborhood would be in the neighborhood plan, and that there would not be a time spent discussing issues that are not appropriate to that neighborhood in that plan. That would be saved for a different neighborhood. And my understanding was the intent of this was to give a vision and not to get to the specifics, because they don't all apply to every neighborhood. Some might, some may. Can you help me if I'm understanding correctly the intent?
Councilmember, I think you understand it completely. The idea of, perhaps there is some concern, we're calling citywide plan, so is that final then? Is this the final plan? And that's not the intent at all. This is kind of set the direction and the umbrella policies for all the detailed that's coming later.
I think on your first page, it says, citywide plan, a section of the City of Littleton Comprehensive Plan. I read that just as it says. But is that putting the plan word there twice confusing? We have, one of the things that I have found in my short time on this job is when folks are looking at land use, they really glom onto that word plan. It means something that is authoritative and from which decisions flow. I'm not sure if it fits. Could you address that?
Yeah, in this example, one of the exhibits we put in there, we tried to identify a comprehensive plan is made up of all these different elements, this being one of them, neighborhood plans being another, future corridor plans being another, and future activity areas being another. And our current plan has a lot of that. They have a preface, an introduction, what has been accomplished up to 1989 when the plan was last written, the community-wide goals and policies, and then the subsections of those that get into a little bit more detail. So I think that's why the planning board kind of arrived at citywide plan, because 4, 5, and 6 all talks about community-wide goals and policies, which is what this is really meant to replace. And that's the only sections of the current comprehensive plan that this is replacing.
Thank you.
And if you look at thickness-wise, they're about the same, quite frankly. And there's no pictures in the current old plan. But.
Other discussion? Council?
So this is where I say all the things I want to say?
Ann?
Okay. So, so I have some comments about various things, but the first thing I'd like to do is look at page A13 at the bottom. The statement from the planning board there, and the public, I think, has this, but if you want me to, I can read it. But it is, to me, the most powerful, important statement in this whole document. It is like a 35,000-foot level look. Should I read this for the public that doesn't have this? Sure. Littleton must rebel against becoming suburbia. We are the kind of place where people with talent are attracted to live. We have a unique identity, sense of place, and a flavor unto ourselves. We want our city to always be something elegant. It is naturally beautiful without ample outdoor recreation. We are a community that values the beauty of a diverse, free-thinking, intelligent people willing to work together to resolve complex issues. We strongly support our arts, athletics, schools, and our heritage. Littleton has an entrepreneurial spirit that wishes to be none other than ourselves. We have a positive outlook for our future. Littleton is the kind of place you rarely find, and we appreciate how special that is. Now, if I just had that even as the whole document, I'd be happy. And I would love to see it move to the beginning of the document. But making me happy isn't the whole reason for having this document. The comprehensive plan guides and constrains the decisions that the council can make or at least it's supposed to, when zoning changes come before us for proposals, and guides other things. So it's really important in my head that this be quite clear. It doesn't mean that it's a straitjacket, but there shouldn't be so much wiggle room because some of the words are not very precise or whatever, that theoretically almost anything would have to be approved under the constraints here. And I meant to start by saying this. I sort of implied it by reading that wonderful statement from the board. The board put in an incredible amount of work on this, and I'm not wanting to fault them in anything that I say, but I still have to give my feedback, because I read this as though something is going to be coming to me or future council people, but if I'm on the council and something comes to council and I have to refer to this, I want to make sure that I darn well understand what it's meaning. And so that's now where I'm going with some comments, whatever. On introduction, page 1, and on page 6 and a couple other places, I think, there's some words used that don't seem to be used consistently or diagrammed the way they're used in the text. So that circle illustration in the bottom left corner, comprehensive plan, has 4 bullets, all equal, because none are indented under each other. And yet the activity areas, if I'm remembering what's on page 6, I'm not flipping over there right now, it says there are 3 kinds of activity areas, and they're the neighborhood corridor and the small area plans and, the neighborhood corridor and small area plans. I think I got that right. And at least one of those is a global one, and the other 3 are subset of that. So there are only 2 things that are equal in bullets, in a sense, the citywide goals and policies, and then the one that breaks down into the neighborhood plans, corridor plans, and activity area plans. So if one's trying to follow this and apply this, it's really important to have the layout and the comments, the text clearly indicate what's the higher level, what's the sub-level, and so forth. So I'm trying not to go through every darn comment that I have. I already pointed out on page 3 what I think is a poor example of the picture on the bottom right there. But that's, we have to figure out whether somebody else would like that changed as much as I would. On page 4, the graph that's there, so please help me with this, because the text in here implies we're just getting older and we're losing school children and this, that, and the other, and we have in the past lost school children, and all of us are getting older. But I'm looking, this is at the census count for 2010, which is that beige line, and at the ages 0 to 4, ages 5 to 9, there's a nice upward slope there that's, when we get to ages 5 to 9, that's as high as any of the other census datas. And that somewhat reflects what I've learned in all the times I've been out campaigning door to door, 3 different times since starting in 2007, that I'll go door to door and somebody comes to the door with a baby that was born, one woman, I think the baby was born 3 days ago. Somebody else was at the hospital having a baby that morning, and the husband comes to the door all excited. The woman down the street is ready to have her baby any day, and she didn't know that baby had been born yet. I mean, babies popping out all over that.
We should update these numbers then, I think.
Pardon?
Well, we should update these numbers probably to include those.
Well, that's part of what I'm saying, if we could find a way to do that. In my own neighborhood watch group, which has 17 houses. We have several young couples, two babies.
Councilmember Cole, can we strive for a little level of succinctness, please?
Okay, so we'll try to do that. But I'm seeing babies out there that aren't showing up here. Trying to be fast, sorry. Oh, page 6. On the right column, about the middle of the first paragraph in the right column, about encourage innovative development. I mean, that means anything just about that isn't like what we have, I think, and could theoretically mean something mighty hideous. But I'm not sure if the innovative development is in terms of, just by that one word, the layout of a project, the buildings in the project, what the buildings are going to do. I'm not sure. I almost think you could strike that because the following sentence really gets at it, that we're looking at stimulating the area and complementing the underlying corridor plan and or neighborhood plans, etc. But innovativeness, it seems to me, is not something that ought to be big. It may or may not happen innovative, but the other stuff is important. Oh, Mr. Taylor did ask for to make correction on something, so I see a note here. Wherever in this it says South Suburban Parks and Recreation District, there's no district in that name. It's South Suburban Parks, plural, and Recreation. So we need to catch that edit. Flipping over here. On page A2, I have a couple of questions in terms of the vision. Littleton will value livability, diversity, and progress. Now, diversity, I don't know too many people would like us to have diversity that includes a lot more alcoholics and drug addicts, but they're part of a certain kind of diversity. So what kind of diversity are we really looking for? And progress, I don't think progress for its own sake is, well, I'm not sure what progress is. It's not defined, it's not in the definition, so I'm not sure. So somebody comes in and would argue that this proposed rezoning change is going to, apply to progress. What do we have to kind of guide our thinking?
Thank you.
On page A4, I've already suggested that we need to delete that reference to downtown because it is part of the downtown plan, and I just don't see it belonging in here. It doesn't weaken this document because it's in the larger combination of documents.
Are there any other comments? Discussion?
I think she's still going.
Oh. On page A6, I'm not sure why we need to have a statement in here telling us to maintain the relationship with South Suburban Parks and Rec. I mean, that's a goal. That's something council decides is who's best to be doing whatever, and we have contract with them that gets renewed occasionally or an agreement.
I think if I could just add on that, Councilmember, that was something that was actually, I believe, left out, and I think the Planning Board felt that South Suburban is really a big part of maintaining our open space areas and creating the parks, that we needed to reference them somehow. So this is...
But I think what you just said, what they said is important, is the maintaining of those. And again, I have no objection to South Suburban, but in the future, who knows who will think might be the best to maintain those. So I just think that that's too narrow for a high-level policy statement. I'm probably skipping over something important. On page A13, item 3.5, implement the city's new economic plan, et cetera. That's as you referred to, several documents that work together. I don't think one should be referring to another. Those are all separate for council, to consider and revise and update as needed. So, can you say why that would be in there?
I think I would say under the context that these are policies to direct Littleton's growth. So economic plan is a part of that. So I think that's perhaps why it was pulled out and specifically mentioned here.
Well, if we implement the new one and then we want to revise it at some point, which I assume we would do as years roll along, right?
Originally wrote
so
this.
It might be better to say to have an economic plan, right? And then whichever one we have at the time would make sense.
Right, and I think this was originally written when it was new. So that was a year ago.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's not new anymore. So I'm sure if you took new out, it wouldn't change the substance of that.
And I probably skipped, no, I didn't. Let's see. Appendix, page 6, or Appendix 6. The percent with the high school education, what age group does that include? On the bottom there.
You're looking at the blue graph on A6?
Yeah. It says population with high school diploma only. I'm assuming, but I might be wrong, that that's people who are past the typical high school graduation age. But I don't know
They
that.
actually have a high school diploma, 18% of Littleton.
Who have only a high school diploma.
Correct.
But does it include 18-year-olds? I mean, does it include recent graduates? And I mean, it's everybody over the typical graduation age, or?
Again, this is a projection from the census, so the American Community Survey. So that's.
Is that the question that they would have been finding out over? Okay.
Part of your, what you fill out with your census information.
Okay. And on page 8 in the appendix, is there no way to get a little more recent data on our labor force than 2011?
Potentially, I'm not really sure where. I think this came from the same source. I don't know that it's really changed that much since 2011, quite frankly. But if you have another source.
But we're more out of the recession than we were, so I'm just wondering, is there more recent data? And on page 9, with the a 1990 source for anything that's in here, there wasn't really, I think, a major comparison to 24 years ago, I think, in the body. So I'm wondering why we would have that in here.
I think somebody said it best, that it really is a snapshot in time. So we picked the best data that we had at the moment they were writing the draft, and that's what's represented here. Certainly the numbers could change into the future.
I mean, I guess 1990 means nothing to me today. I mean,
I'm not sure where you're referencing 1990.
Unless my eyes are having some excitement.
Appendix 9 you're talking, right?
Appendix 9.
Yeah, it says the source 1990 census.
Oh, okay. There's two sets of data there. So when we go back to the earlier years for the housing breakout, yes, we use the 1990 census.
Oh, so the two, okay. And then the other is the homeowners
From the Home Builders Association.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
And that would then be done as of 2013, perhaps, or late 2012?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm sorry, you see, I missed that slash with that I thought it was a kind of combination of 1990 stuff, so, but of course it couldn't be. So, okay, part of my studying for this was with a tremendous headache that I still have from a concussion, so anyway, sorry. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you. Other questions or discussion? At this point in time, what's the sentiment? Oh,
I'm sorry?
Councilmember Valdez?
To the council, I guess when you go to the status of small area plans, and Mr. Stallman, I think you were hitting on this as well as Mr. Beckman, on some of the priorities. I would really like to see council, adjust some of the priority ratings that we have in here. The Broadway corridor study, for instance, I think that should be a high. I think what we have now is a very old Broadway corridor study, and if we're going to make decisions based on something, I don't even remember the date of it now, but I think that needs to be changed to a high. As well as when you get to the Progress neighborhood, I would really like to see that changed to a high. I could also see the other neighborhoods, as you pointed out, like Kittering Lake, for instance, while low may not sound good, that is what it is. Yeah. So I can see taking all these mediums, with the exception of Progress, making them all low, and then making Progress a high, because we do recognize we have issues over there. I can see leaving maybe Trailmark as a medium, just because I know we have some things over there. But again, the Broadway corridor should be moved to high. That's the one change I would want in this thing, because as I understand this, City Manager, are you paying attention?
I am.
Okay, thank you. Because the next step then is going to be to change the small area plans. Is that correct? Once this thing is approved, whenever it's approved. Is that correct?
That is correct, and I think I would agree with your comments relative to Broadway Progress in particular.
And the small area plans will be based on essentially this, as far as what their marching orders would be, as far as what's going to take
From a workload standpoint,
correct.
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Those are my comments. Thank you. Thank you.
And I don't have the date on that Broadway one as well, but I think we, as staff, we would concur that it needs to be updated.
Quite old. Yeah. Thank you.
Absent other discussion, looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Mayor. I move that the resolution approving the citywide plan as an amendment to the comprehensive plan be approved.
Second.
Council discussion.
So I'm trying to decide how I'm going to vote, but I really would like to have whatever updates or corrections made before we actually approve it, so we see it in a final form with whatever people have referred to. I would like to have a little more discussion about it, but I have a sense that other people don't want to.
Mayor, I would ask that if there are specific, Councilmember Valdez had just made some suggestions relative to, I believe, 3 of the small area plans, modifying those, and if you want to do those as separate motions or direction, I think that would be appropriate. And Councilmember Cole's comments, if there's some things that you guys want to discuss through motions for those, obviously.
I thought there was something else that Glenn said that he would check on, that somebody had raised an issue with earlier.
I think there's some non-substantive things that you had brought up as well, which I don't think you need to take individual, clarifying some of the Councilmember Cole's comment on one of the circle on the earlier page. I don't think we need a motion on that. If you'll just allow us to do some graphic changes.
Well, let's start with Councilmember Valdez. Are you looking for an amendment, Councilmember?
Looking to me?
Yes.
Yes. I make the motion for the status of small area plans, that we change that we change all the neighborhoods to low, with the exception of Progress Park neighborhood, which we change to high. And for Trailmark neighborhood, we leave medium. Part of the motion will also be that on the corridors, that we make the Broadway corridor study high, as well as under the activity areas that we change the Littleton Boulevard, South Broadway to high.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
The motion's on the table. Discussion? Okay. Seeing no discussion, looking for council to vote. Trying to restate that, it is changing a priority, which is on introduction page 6 for the status of small area plans. For neighborhoods, they would be low except for Progress Park neighborhood would be labeled high, and the Trailmark neighborhood would be labeled medium. As far as the corridors, change the Broadway corridor study to high from medium. And with regard to the activity areas, Littleton Boulevard and South Broadway be changed from medium to high. Council ready to vote?
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
I have a question. Okay. So now on the activity areas, we did not include mineral or county line. And then I'm thinking that perhaps that should be added in there. Well, mineral and South Broadway.
There's no county line.
There is no county line at all. But I'm thinking, what about the mineral corridor itself? Does that really address it in there? I guess I would like to see it at least added, perhaps low.
Director Van Nimwegen.
We do not have mineral or county line identified as a future corridor study. Again, I think the previous plan didn't. I think the feeling was it's pretty well established land use wise. So no, those two roadways were not included as future corridors.
I would have stated that otherwise, which might have been that Mineral Avenue and South Broadway include mineral up to mineral, so it includes South Park and the business area, and that be included the South Park business area, which includes most of the commercial along county line within that.
Right. Now, the planning board did, I guess, identify that area as a future activity area. So I'm sorry to split semantics with you, but yes, that area as far as the employment, and they specifically talked about the hospital, needs to be, that's still a dynamic area, so they did want to focus on that versus the whole corridor of mineral.
So in essence, you're excluding the South Park business park. Business property owners are excluded from this?
I don't know that we're excluding anybody at this point. I mean, it's a circle of a certain size, but I don't think it indicates that means it's 600 acres or 800 acres. If it makes sense to include South Park, certainly it would be.
I'd see it hard not to, but that's so.
I would probably agree with you.
And I guess I was thinking it would be under corridors, where I was really thinking that under corridors we'd have county line, perhaps it would be low, as well as mineral corridor, and again, perhaps that would be low. So if I may, sure. I would like to make a motion to add 2 corridors, the county line corridor, and also add the mineral corridor, and I'm okay with calling both of those low.
Second.
Okay. Council, any discussion? Okay. Looking to vote?
The vote is 6 in favor, with Councilmember Brinkman voting no. The motion carries 6-1.
And while leaving that up, I did not state the motion, so I will do that at this point in time.
Thank you.
Which is to add 2 activity areas, one being County Line and one being Mineral Avenue, with the priority of low on each.
It was corridors.
As corridors, excuse me, corridor studies.
Got it, as corridors.
Both low.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Other discussion or amendments? Councilmember Stallman.
I'm going to move that we strike This is one of the ones, and I think it sounds like Jim Taylor had provided input to a lot of people, but one of the ones he suggested that I agree with would be section 1.9 on page A.4. 1.9C talks about achieving building heights, and the concern would be that this is restrictive in proximity to Main Street, that allowing people to make informed decisions as situations require in areas in proximity to Main Street might allow for things that would be somewhat higher than the...
Well, I'm going to stop you at the moment.
Okay.
You've made a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right.
To
Fair
strike
point.
the paragraph.
Fair
Is there a
point.
second?
Okay, you're right.
I'll second it.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Okay.
1.9.
Now discussion.
Sub C, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
1.9C.
Sub C, yeah,
Sub C.
Oh, just sub C?
just sub C.
Yes.
That was
Well-
second.
Okay, now comment.
Okay. So without getting long-winded, hypothetically, if we wanted to, somebody wanted to put a hotel, I'm trying, put some sort of a structure up at the corner of Broadway and Bowles, or Santa Fe and Bowles for the sake of an argument. This wouldn't overtly apply, but might give some counterintuitive direction. So it seems like getting it out and letting people make the decision of what they want to do in areas that are in proximity to Main Street makes more sense.
Okay. Other discussion? Comments?
Yeah, I'd like to amend that amendment to delete the rest of 1.9.
Absent a second, we're left with the amendment as stated. Other discussion? Okay. The motion is to strike subparagraph C within 1.9 on page 8.4, which would also require or necessitate a renumeration of the paragraphs remaining. Council ready to vote?
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
Comments, discussions, or amendments? Councilmember Beckman.
I'm not sure that this is substantive, but we are getting down in the weeds on some things, so I would like to include a mention of the Highline Canal Trail on page A6. Page A6 it talks about an outdoor Littleton, and we talk a lot about the South Platte River, which obviously is so important to us.
You making a motion?
Yes, I am. Include the words Highline Canal Trail, including the Highline Canal Trail in paragraph 2.6.
Looking for a second?
Second.
Okay. Motion and a second. Now you can comment.
What I said.
Jerry or me?
It just needs to be mentioned in there. I think it's important to mention the Highline Canal Trail as a futures issue for the city.
Bruce, how would you word that?
In paragraph 2.6,
I'm looking there.
just a comma, including the Highline Canal Trail, I think just gets it in there for discussion, for consideration in this. In addition, it says, in addition to the river and its tributaries, identify and safeguard and enrich the city's other outdoor resources, including the Highline Canal Trail.
You're adding it to the end of the sentence?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Additional discussion? Seeing none, the motion is to include the following, including the Highline Canal Trail at the end of the sentence in item 2.6 on page 8.6 within policies. Council ready to vote? Excuse me.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
Thank you. Councilmember Stallman?
Well, similar to what Councilmember Beckman said, I don't know if this one may be a moderately substantive one. In section 2.1 on the same page,
Are you making a motion?
I am going to make a motion, yeah.
Thank you.
Just identifying it. it's page A6. I'd like to insert the words, well, it's treat the South Platte River and its tributaries as insert one of the city's most important assets. So that's the motion.
The South Platte River.
Well, the sentence says treat the South Platte River and its tributaries as the city's most important assets. And I'm inserting the words as one of the city's most important assets.
Are you on 2.6?
2.1.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's why I didn't see South Platte.
Okay. Is there a second?
Thank you.
Second.
Okay. Council discussion? Okay. Seeing none, the motion on the table is for, rather than the, to mention it as one of the city's most important resources. Council ready to vote?
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
Councilmember Stallman?
And just make one last one. I think the comment sort of where Councilmember Cole was going on page A.13, section 3.5, would move to strike the word new in terms of implementing the city's economic plan.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Seeing none, the motion is to remove the word new from item 3.5 on page A13 within the transformative actions. Council ready to vote?
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
Thank you. Additional items?
So on A13 at the bottom, that statement that I suggested earlier be moved, do I have to move to have it moved and say where?
Let's be safe and do that.
Glenn, where would it go?
You had suggested the beginning.
Well, I know, but I'm just, he's the one that's the expert on comp plan, so I'm thinking it would follow the mayor's letter. Does that
That makes
gives-
sense.
That does? Okay, that's so moved.
Second.
Glad it could help.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Discussion?
Jerry.
Very
Speak into your mic.
Okay. The motion on the table is to take the ending paragraph on page A13 and move it to the beginning of the document following the letter from the mayor. Council ready to vote?
The vote is 5 in favor with Councilmember Brinkman and Councilmember Stein voting no. The motion carries.
Additional discussion or amendments?
Then I think Ms. Breezak made a good point about the identify on 2.1A, so I would move to amend to replace the word identify with inventory. So on page 6,
where's that?
page
Where are you?
A6,
A6.
item 2.1A,
Inven.
substitute inventory for identify.
Is there a second? Absent and second. Next. And not seeing any other, I'm not sure whether a motion is needed, but the reference to Metro Vision 2035 will be dated before the end of this year. And it would be the appropriate Metro Vision.
What page is that? I have a note on that somewhere.
It's on page A8, item 3.8. In the footnote, it says that it's going to be updated, and I just want to see whether that I need to make a motion to make that a change or to just reference the appropriate document.
I would recommend that you make a motion that subsequent amendments as adopted by council or something to that extent. I think that's what Jim Taylor was suggesting, and certainly that'd be the case. I think the planning board didn't want to be presumptuous and.
Yeah, working with the Dr. Cog board, they're required to have that, so it's not whether it's going to change or not. It's a time-based requirement that's going to come through. And do we put that in the footnote to be updated as it's?
I would put it in 3.8.
Okay, so, and its subsequent updates would be my motion.
Second.
Okay, discussion?
Repeat the motion one more time, please.
The motion is adding on page A8, item 3.8, endorse MetroVision 2035 and its subsequent versions as appropriate.
If we're going to have discussion, I would still want it to be accepted by City Council.
Okay, that's, it says, and accepted by City Council. It's not changing that part.
Okay, so.
It's just adding and its updates as accepted by the City Council.
So the 2035 and its updates. Oh, right there. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would you strike the 2005 reference then?
Yes, let's add that as a friendly.
Yeah.
Any additional discussion?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I like the MetroVision stuff. I like that we participate in that. But I have problems endorsing something that we haven't seen. It seems to me this ought to be encouraging us, asking us to consider them and approve them, you know, as they ought to be saying something that's referring to it, but not telling us to endorse something we haven't even seen. I'm sorry. I have a problem with that, and I don't really want to vote against this, but I'll
make the comment that it says both that it's approved by the Dr. Cog and accepted by the city.
Well,
so we would have a role.
When is the accepting occurring?
Well, it can't be until after there's a plan.
I know, that's what I'm saying. So why would we be endorsing something that we haven't accepted yet? We haven't seen yet. I'm not thinking we won't do it. I just think we ought to have some wording. I mean, we're participating in the development, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather see that kind of focus on continue participating in the metro-wide, planning or whatever. But it's like saying you'll endorse a prenuptial agreement you didn't even see.
That would be dangerous. Councilmember Stallman?
My interpretation of this was that I think, if I understood what Mayor Cernanik was talking about, assuming, for example, we've approved MetroVision 2035, that would be the one that's in force. If 2050 is proposed and we don't approve it, then we're still working under quote-unquote 2035. But if we then get 2050 and we approve it, 2050 would slot in instead of 2035. Is that what you were trying to, is that a fair interpretation?
That was what I was trying to get at.
Okay.
Which is whatever is the current one when it's both approved by Dr. Cog and the council.
Okay.
Then we're doing that.
What you just said is clearer than this. Endorse what the current version of.
Well, I will leave it to staff to get the precise wording, recognizing our intent is to work with the current, but it requires 2 levels of approval.
Thank you.
Okay, that's the motion. It's been seconded. Additional discussion? No? Ready to vote?
Vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
Thank you.
Then I have a question. There's several edits in here, and I'm not about to be calling them out. Do I have permission to give feedback about the edits?
Well, I think we will take those. I'm saying those as primarily non-substantive.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, and we'll take those. For example, I'll even put one out there, which is the definition of neighborhood uses neighborhood in the definition rather than a group of people that happen to be habitating nearby.
Could I make a suggestion in the language there to substitute the words "its residents" for the words "the neighborhood"?
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, I think all these non-substantive ones, if you just want to let staff know, we'd be happy to clean those up.
And communicate it to staff to make sure that we aren't missing any.
And when, if we're going to be giving those comments, do we need to have them? I mean, because I'd rather just come in and flip through the pages than to try to type stuff up.
Sooner than later would be nice, whenever you have time.
Well, I'm not going to stay overnight, so give me a day or something.
Well, I think if you're coming in to do some training on, why don't you just plan on it when you do the when you come in.
That training I'm going to do, I can do it then. Thank you.
Okay. So now we're at the main motion. We have a number of amendments.
I just have one question, and not to make a motion, this may be substantive or non-substantive, but it's dated 2013, which I know was the intent all along. Here we are in 2014, on the very, very first page.
It will carry an adoption date on whenever council will take it. So
what I thought.
Yes, non-substantive at this point in time. I'm City Attorney. Is it okay if I do not restate all of the amendments?
Yes.
Okay.
Unless anyone, yeah, as long as you say as amended. We have recorded them.
Okay, so the motion on the table is adoption of the citywide plan as we've gone through the amendments. Council ready to vote?
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
Thank you.
Good job, planning board.
Yes, and thank you to their years of work on this.
Yeah.
Moving on to general business, there's a resolution approving the Ridge Reserve Subdivision Filing Number 1, First Amendment Final Plat, authorizing the rescission and release of a subdivision improvement agreement and landscape plans between the city and the owner of the Ridge Reserve Subdivision Filing Number 1, and consenting to the termination of a cross-access easement and maintenance declaration. Director Van Nimwegen.
Mr. Mayor and Council, this was a plat that was created in 2007. Certain things happened. The economy happened, for one. We have a new owner of the property who is here this evening, and really we're going through this kind of complicated process to basically get rid of that plat and bring it back to what it originally was, which was one lot. So with that, we're recommending approval of the resolution to make the changes. However, there are still some street improvements that they are required to do, and they're agreeable to that, and we put those as note on the final plat that hopefully you'll approve. There is a credit. The developer previously paid an open space credit of $1,515, so the next step would be they'd make an application to credit their impact fee at the time they pull a building permit for the site. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Councilmember Beckman.
Glenn, these changes were not posted at the location. Was there any requirement to post? Because I think when it was previously redone, I think it was posted.
It was actually part, I believe, of a plan development, or no, it was not. So I don't think with a subdivision, because we're not changing the zoning, it's not something we would post necessarily. Same with the next case. So they're meeting the code, they're providing everything according to what the zoning allows, so there's no reason to post it, like a sign on the site is what you're thinking?
Yeah.
Right.
Just to notify the neighbors of the change.
Right. Again, our code doesn't require that for the subdivision process. Certainly, if a change in land use, change in zoning, we would post the site.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions?
I just have a general question. To the extent that you know, and this may be directed better to the applicant, I'm just sort of curious. I understand all the documents, but what is general plan is for the property, just to build a structure, or do you know?
I'm not really sure.
Okay.
I think mainly he knows he can't build this 4-lot subdivision and make it work. So he'd like to, I think, get a clean slate. Maybe he builds one house, maybe he splits it. But again, I don't know that. I don't know, but perhaps Jay Maish is here.
Thank you.
Other questions or discussion? Looking for a motion?
I move to approve Resolution Number 11, Series 2014, approving the Reg Reserve Subdivision Filing Number 1, First Amendment Final Plat, authorizing the rescission and release of a subdivision improvement agreement and landscape plans between the city and the owner of the Ridge Reserve Subdivision Filing Number 1, and consenting to the termination of a cross-access easement and maintenance declaration.
Second.
Motion and second have been made. Council discussion? Seeing none, our city attorney, can I move ahead without rereading it?
Yeah.
Okay, so motion on the table. Council ready to vote?
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
Next on general business is a resolution approving the Overlook Plateau Final Plat and Subdivision Improvement Agreement between Jameson Patio Homes LLC and the City of Littleton.
Mr. Mayor and Council, this is a subdivision of 10 lots. The zoning, this was a planned development. I got the two mixed up. So the original PD allowed 52 lots on 16.9 acres. This parcel allowed 10 lots with that original PD. Again, that was approved back in 1997. The original landowner held on to it till very recently and has passed on. The family has sold it to the new owner. They are providing a subdivision that would be gated and have private streets. The lots range from 7,000 to I think just over 15,000 square feet. The planning board looked at a preliminary plat in this case because we have 10 lots and they don't all front on a currently dedicated street. And they recommended approval on September 23rd, 2013. We are recommending a minor amendment to the SIA that's before you, and if you see a page up there with just a couple of sentences entitled Exhibit C, I'll just show that to you really quickly. So there was some conflict between how we provide for the phasing of the project and when we make sure that the improvements are in place. So what we're recommending is we change out this Exhibit C to strike the first sentence that says all private improvements will be completed in Phase 1 prior to the third building permit, for something that's consistent with the rest of the document that states public improvements will be completed prior to the first certificate of occupancy, and the schedule of completion of all private improvements shall be in accordance with Exhibit D that's in the agreement. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions on the proposed plat and SIA.
Council, any questions? Councilmember Brinkman?
I noticed in some of the communication that there was conversation with the homeowners association of the Overlook, or with some of those neighbors. Can you kind of go through issues and resolutions?
Sure. The applicant, I believe, met with the HOA board at one of their meetings, I think at 2 different times. And then subsequently, he had a meeting with staff with a neighbor that's directly across the street. I'm not sure what the issues are with the HOA. The issues I was aware of is the concern for the private gate within this subdivision, and it was kind of a twofold concern. What kind of message does that send as far as their subdivision? I think the Public Works Director and I met with that property owner and talked about some options as far as restricting some access into that subdivision. I think we gave him some good ideas as far as what could be done. But again, I think I'd probably have to defer to the applicant as far as issues that the HOA board came up specifically with.
There is not going to be an additional access on Mineral. into there?
Not onto Mineral, no.
Okay, so they would have to access into the overlook
Right.
entrance? Okay.
They would have to come into Overlook and then enter the plateau. Correct.
Additional questions?
Just since you mentioned it being gated and the streets still not fully identified, issues like access to fire trucks and those kinds of things, that will still be addressed at some point in the future?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, and there'll be easement that requires public access. The fire department will have a special gate access. So if there is an emergency, they get through the gate, and for police as well.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Council discussion? Looking for a motion, and if you're going to move to approve the resolution, please include the amendment to Exhibit C.
I move that the resolution approving the Overlook Plateau Final Plat Subdivision Improvement Agreement be approved with the amendment to Exhibit C.
Second.
Thank you. Additional discussion by council? Seeing none, council ready to vote?
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
Thank you. That takes us to comments and reports. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple. First, I wanted to remind council we have a Tri-Cities meeting this Friday. Mayor, you might have had that on your list as well. Primarily, it will be a South Platte update. Also want to, if you could get Chief Armstrong to stand up. We have our Chief Chris Armstrong, our new fire chief here, so I just want him to say hello to everyone.
Welcome, Chris.
Welcome to town.
We're very happy he is here and is already making a positive influence, so thanks, Chief.
Is he on the payroll now?
He is on the payroll now.
That's why he's wearing a uniform today, huh?
That is correct.
Okay,
Yes.
got it.
Sorry you had to wait so long to say hello.
He got a little excited and started early, actually, so it's great. Wanted to let the council know that Councilmember Brinkman and I are continuing to work on the Chatfield reauthorization and looking at how we can partner with Inglewood and Sheridan to try, along with others, Arapahoe County in particular, to get some additional wet water in the river. And so the record of decision for the Chatfield should be released any point now. It will be approved. The 122-2 permit process through the state, which was another component of the reauthorization, has been approved unanimously by the Water Board. And so now we're really in the place of how do we try to get some wet water for the downstream in the best fashion possible. And so we're going to have another follow-up meeting with our local partners here, I believe, this week or next week. And we're going to have Right Water Engineering, who I believe you all know has been our consultant on this process, really talk to us in some detail about what the risks are and what the opportunities are as well. And so when we get to a place of actually finding out what that support is from our partners, we will come back to the council if there's any action necessary at this point. It's kind of a double-edged sword. There's an opportunity for some potentially low-cost wet water, but there are some major control entities which could make that water moot. And so we're trying to figure out what are the odds around that, how much money do we want to spend, how often would those waters be available to us, what are the impacts for those, for the amount of water that we could get. Are we talking 5 CFS, 10 CFS? That might serve our purposes, but not necessarily what Inglewood has wanted to do around some of the more recreational activities along the corridor. So just want to let you know that that's continuing to go. We've spent a fair amount of time and
Will this come up in the discussion on Friday or not?
This will probably not come up. We'll see. We want to talk in that smaller group first and really get. It's somewhat, if you'll allow me, the saying the come to Jesus conversation with our partners to say, are people interested or not? Because right now it's been, quite honestly, it's been Littleton leading this charge, and there's not been many folks standing next to us nor even close behind us. And so we need to regroup at this point because I think we have the vast, we have participated in many more meetings than anyone else, and we're probably in the know. I can tell you I know more about the Chatfield water as well as the downstream waters than I ever thought I was going to learn about. So, but we will loop back with council, but just to let you know where that is. I will be attending, I believe it's actually tomorrow night, a meeting at the Highlands Ranch relative to an alternative to the southwest extension of the light rail. There's a firm that is providing RTD, I think, an unsolicited bid, for the personal transportation device. So I've seen lots of these over my years in transportation, so I will.
Does it start with Beam Me Up, Scotty?
It does not, but I think somewhat Disneyland with personal little Jetson things that are on rails that take you around. So it'll be interesting, if nothing else, to see that. And this Thursday and Friday, we are doing our marketing manager interviews. I think we received about 280 applicants, and we are interviewing 11 of them. So we had a bunch of staff review those.
And has information gone to every one of the applicants what their status is?
I don't know if it's gone out yet, but it will be. Yep, it's part of what they do. And that's what I have. Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. We'll start at this end of the dais. Councilmember Stein.
Characteristically brief tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Brinkman.
No report.
Councilmember Valdez.
I do have one question, and that is, when do we anticipate the construction to begin over at King Soopers?
They are still in the permitting process, but we hope to hear any time. They were originally shooting for, they need about a two-week window lead time for staffing purposes. They'll start to sell down that inventory. They were shooting for January 15th. Obviously, that's come and gone. So I'd anticipate within the next couple weeks they will get their demolition permit, and they will notify us, and they will again start to sell off their inventory. They want to do that as opposed to move it, and then there'll be a full closure probably within 3 weeks to a month for that.
February-ish sometime?
Yeah.
They told the omnibus February 15th.
Yeah, I was just going to say February 15th, just middle. I mean, I was just guessing on that. Okay, cool. And then I think there's been some both email and concern raised from the council relative to how we address and work with King Soopers around the closure. That is an area, as you all are aware, a lot of folks don't have cars and they walk to that King Soopers. And so we have made some amendments to the shopping cart to do additional routes to take them to the other King Soopers. And so we'll get that word out as well. And we're going to be meeting with King Soopers to see if we can get some funding from them to possibly get another bus or do some other additional routing information on RTD routes and that type of thing as well. So we'll do what we can to work with them and really push King Soopers in particular to address some of those issues.
So when will it be posted so that folks over there who don't know that anything's about to happen, when will something be posted so they will know?
I can't tell you exactly when. As I said, I would say early February. I was given the 2-week advance notice. So I think you'll probably start to see sometimes. Yeah, it's about a 2-week notice.
Thank you. The last part was on the transportation issue like my email, I think, said to you, I'm all for the omnibus and the shopping cart helping those that are eligible. I mean, there needs to be some criteria. Of course, we just can't be moving all kinds of people on. And also, I would want it to only be anywhere within that's for shopping groceries within the city of Littleton, not to go somewhere else outside the city.
That is correct. We agree.
Cool. All right. Thank you. So you're going to put together qualifications on who will be eligible, what criteria?
Well, we have that under our existing shopping cart program, and so that's what we would use. And then part of what we would also do is make sure, as I said, that people are aware about the bus routes, RTD, that can get them down to how to get to the Mineral and Broadway King Soopers, how to get over to the King Soopers in Inglewood at the Bellevue and Federal one as well.
Yeah, some of the folks I've been hearing from and talking to with recently, they are just totally unaware of this. The rumor is out there that it's going to happen, and now there's a little buzz out there. They're getting a little concerned. So.
Yeah, I think they'll have about a 2-week window.
Cool. 2 weeks.
The part that I'm not sure, and I've had some communication with others, is that's come up, as well as the reason for the demolition and the fact that there does need to be a scraping and a regrading of the property to accommodate single floor level for the King Soopers, and for folks to actually understand that with the expanded space. So
It's a difficult site.
yes. Councilmember Stallman?
Yeah, other than to say it's good to see everyone again, no report.
It's good to see you, too.
Councilmember Cole?
So I do have a question, I guess, for our attorney. Are there some regulations, guidelines we might use in to address some of the questions that Ms. Breezak asked about, and how long we preserve various electronic documents and so forth?
I think, well, the answer is yes, and Wendy probably can answer some of these questions. The state archivist has rules for how long documents must be preserved, and I'm assuming we are compliant with those rules.
Yes, we are.
Okay.
We've adopted the Colorado Municipal Retention Schedule, and it addresses electronic email, voicemail, not voicemail, voicemail, text in that Colorado retention schedule.
Even among council members?
Yes, you should be deleting non-substantive emails, and if it has to do with something that we're working on, or then they should be kept and either forwarded to me, and I'll put them in my archives.
Okay.
If it's a project that's going on right now that would have a retention schedule other than non-substantive.
And
all of the retention schedules are, well, it varies on what project it is. Like, minutes are forever. An email that has to do with a zoning issue.
I would suggest, I mean, if we want to do a training on this,
Yes,
that we
I
could
could
do
do
it as a study session or something like that, or we can send out
Will we have time
an
next week
information
for
sheet.
just a quick briefing?
Yeah, we could do it. It's not overly complicated. I mean, we can do
It's not
it
long.
in a one-pager and just email it out to
And
you
that'd be good
guys.
for citizens, too.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. One other issue related to your question, Councilmember Cole, on the issue of emailing each other. The council protocols do say that side conversations between council members should be avoided, and I read that broadly to mean verbal conversations or electronic conversations. So I think that's already covered in the protocols that you adopted tonight.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I'm not sure I would infer that from the way that part of our protocols is worded, but if I'm the only one that thinks that, it's not an issue.
Anything else?
I don't think so. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Bratton?
I do have one thing to mention. As we know, we reinstituted having council liaisons with the 3 advisory boards, and I think I may be the first one that went back to the Fine Arts Board and reintroduced myself. And I want to tell you that they were glad that we did that. They thought it was a great move, and they were very glad to see that it was happening again, at least with the Fine Arts Board. That's all I have.
I just have a few things. I'm going to go down quickly through a litany of items here. With regard to MPAC 64, which was discussed in a number of places, including the newspaper, if folks are interested, I've made available to the city manager talking points on that 2014 ballot measure that was out there and surveyed that are available. So the language around what we had previously known as defects is now owner-occupied attached housing, and it's been interesting to see that that may have a life in this legislative session. A couple of other priorities that were identified at the Metro Mayor's Caucus are transportation, water, and then another one of homelessness, hunger, and what is now the buzz term, attainable housing. So if folks are interested in more information on that, pay attention on that. With regard the Attorney's Office evaluation, a survey will be forthcoming as soon as we get some wordsmithing completed on that, right? Okay. And then for folks that know one of our residents in the city who's been serving as a local government relationship manager is Pat Cronenberger. She's going to be transitioning from DRCOG. She prefers that term as opposed to retirement. For those that know Rick, he's been retired for 2 years, and it's causing some tension on their travel schedules, so be aware of that. With regard to DRCOG, the Advisory Committee on Aging is taking up a strategic look on changing some of the funding, and across the metro area, this is taking a look. One of their most visible programs is probably Meals on Wheels that gets funded through the Older Americans Act, and as we all know, might possibly expect, funding from Washington is going to be tighter going forward. So, and then yesterday I met with Congressman Gardner and brought up some of our priority items with regard to the fairness, Main Street tax issue, transportation, as well as water, and to carry some of that forward to Washington. So, I'd like to thank the citizens still present this evening. Thank you to staff. Great to have Chief Armstrong on board.
Amen.
And with that, we're adjourned.
Yay. Good job.